On Friday, October 10th, 2008, Johnny Altinger left work in a good mood. It was the end of another long week at the oil sands, and he had plans for the evening. He stopped by a friend's house on his way home, excited to share the news. He had been chatting with someone online, a woman named Jen. They had been messaging back and forth for a few days, and tonight they were finally going to meet. His friends were happy for him. Johnny had been using online dating sites for a while now, hoping to find someone special. It was not always easy, but he stayed optimistic. That was just who Johnny was, always looking forward, always believing the best in people. He showed his friends the messages. Jen seemed nice, friendly. She had suggested meeting at a location in South Edmonton, near a film studio where she said she worked. It was a bit unusual, but Johnny did not think much of it. He was 38 years old, confident, and looking forward to a nice evening. His friends wished him luck. "Have fun, buddy," one of them said. "Text us later and let us know how it goes." Johnny smiled. "I will," he promised. He never sent that text. By Sunday morning, October 12th, Johnny's friends were starting to worry. He was not answering his phone. That was unusual. Johnny always answered his phone. He was the kind of person who returned calls, who showed up when he said he would, who kept people in the loop. When you called Johnny Altinger, he picked up. That was just how he was. Then the email arrived. It came from Johnny's account, and at first, it seemed to explain everything. The message said he had decided, on a whim, to fly to Costa Rica for a vacation. He wrote that he had met a woman, and they were traveling together. He said he had lost his phone and would be out of touch for a while. He told his friends and family not to worry, but his friends did worry, because the email did not sound like Johnny at all. This is the story of how those friends refused to accept an easy answer, how they trusted their instincts when something felt wrong, and how their determination to find the truth brought a killer to justice. This is the story of Johnny Altinger, and the friends who would not give up on him. If you appreciate in-depth coverage of cases like this, I would be grateful if you would subscribe. It helps me continue researching and sharing these important stories. Johnny Brian Altinger was born on December 11th, 1969 in Edmonton, Alberta, Canada. He grew up in a working-class family and learned early on the value of hard work and loyalty. Those who knew him described him as dependable, the kind of person you could count on. If Johnny said he would be somewhere, he was there. If he made a promise, he kept it. By 2008, Johnny was working as a pipeline inspector in the oil sands industry. It was demanding work, often taking him to remote locations in northern Alberta. The hours were long, and the conditions could be harsh, but Johnny took pride in what he did. His colleagues respected him. He was good at his job, meticulous in his inspections, and always willing to help a coworker who needed it. But Johnny's life was not just about work. He had a close circle of friends, people he had known for years. They would get together regularly, watching hockey games, barbecuing in the summer, just enjoying each other's company. Johnny was the kind of friend who showed up. When someone needed help moving, Johnny was there. When someone was going through a tough time, Johnny listened. He had a good sense of humor. He liked to laugh. He was not loud or boastful, but he had a quiet confidence about him. People felt comfortable around Johnny. He made them feel heard. In his personal life, Johnny was looking for love. He had tried the traditional ways of meeting people, but like many single people in their 30s, he had turned to the internet. Online dating was becoming more common in 2008, and Johnny approached it with his characteristic optimism. He joined a site called Plenty of Fish, one of the most popular dating platforms at the time. He filled out his profile honestly. He uploaded recent photos. He wrote about his interests and what he was looking for in a partner. He went on a few dates. Some went well. Some did not lead anywhere. But Johnny did not get discouraged. He believed that the right person was out there, and he was willing to put in the effort to find her. His friends sometimes teased him about his online dating adventures, but it was always good-natured. They wanted Johnny to be happy. They wanted him to find someone who appreciated him the way they did, and Johnny would laugh along with their jokes, never taking himself too seriously. One thing everyone agreed on. Johnny was consistent. He kept in touch. If you were his friend, you heard from him regularly. He returned messages. He made plans and stuck to them. If something came up and he had to cancel, he always let you know ahead of time. That was just who Johnny was. So when that email arrived on October 12th, saying he had impulsively flown to Costa Rica without telling anyone, his friends immediately knew something was wrong. Because that was not Johnny. That was not the person they knew. But we are getting ahead of ourselves. Let us go back to that Friday night, October 10th, and piece together what really happened. Johnny had been messaging with someone using the name Jen. The profile showed an attractive woman who claimed to work in the film industry. The conversations had been friendly and flirtatious. After a few days of back-and-forth messages, Jen suggested they meet in person. She gave him an address in South Edmonton. She said she was working late at a film studio and suggested he come by. It was a bit unconventional for a first date, but the conversation had been going well and Johnny was interested. He did not see any red flags, just a woman with an unusual schedule who was trying to make time to meet him. Johnny drove to the address that Friday evening. It was a residential area, not far from the airport. The location turned out to be a garage that had been converted into a small film studio. This was not entirely unusual for Edmonton, which had a growing independent film scene. It seemed like Jen was exactly who she said she was. Johnny parked his car and walked up to the garage. The door was unlocked. He stepped inside. What Johnny did not know, what he could not have known, was that Jen did not exist. The profile was fake. The photos were stolen from someone else's social media account. The person who had been messaging him was not a woman at all, but a 29-year-old man named Mark Twitchell. And Mark Twitchell was waiting for him in that garage with a plan. The details of what happened next are difficult to recount, but out of respect for Johnny and his loved ones, I will be brief and factual. Johnny was attacked the moment he entered. He was struck and overpowered. He fought back. Evidence would later show that Johnny did not go down easily. He struggled. He tried to defend himself, but he was caught off guard, and his attacker had the advantage of surprise and preparation. Johnny Altinger was killed in that garage on the evening of October 10th, 2008. His body was never recovered. That night, while Johnny's life was ending in a garage in South Edmonton, his friends had no idea anything was wrong. They assumed he was on his date, probably having a good time. They expected to hear from him the next day with a report on how it went. That was the normal pattern. Johnny went on dates, and then he told his friends about them. Sometimes the stories were funny, sometimes disappointing, but he always checked in. Saturday came and went. No word from Johnny. His friends sent a few text messages. No response. They tried calling. The calls went straight to voicemail. By Sunday morning, they were starting to feel uneasy. By Sunday afternoon, that uneasiness had turned into real concern. Then the email arrived. It came from Johnny's email account. The subject line said something about a spontaneous trip. The body of the email explained that Johnny had met a woman, and they had decided on the spur of the moment to fly to Costa Rica together. He wrote that he had lost his phone and would be out of touch for a while. He said he was having an amazing time and told everyone not to worry. He would be back in a few weeks. One of Johnny's closest friends, Dale, read the email carefully. Something about it bothered him immediately. The tone was off. The word choices were strange. Johnny had never mentioned anything about wanting to go to Costa Rica. He had never talked about taking a spontaneous international trip. And most importantly, Johnny would never just disappear without telling his friends first. That was completely out of character. Dale called another friend, a man named Jeff. "Did you see the email?" Dale asked. Jeff had seen it. "Yeah," he said. "It does not sound right." They started comparing notes. The more they talked about it, the more certain they became that something was very wrong. Johnny did not write like that. The phrasing was formal and stilted. Johnny's real emails were casual and full of personality. This one read like someone trying to imitate him but not quite getting it right. There were specific things that stood out. Johnny always signed his emails a certain way. This email did not have his usual sign-off. He had particular expressions he used, little quirks of language that his friends recognized. None of those were in this email. It was as if someone who did not really know Johnny had written it while trying to sound like him. "This is not from Johnny," Dale said. "Someone else sent this." Jeff agreed. "We need to call the police." They tried calling Johnny's phone one more time. Still no answer. They checked with other friends to see if anyone had heard from him. No one had. The last confirmed contact anyone had with Johnny was Friday afternoon, before his date. On Monday, October 13th, Dale and Jeff went to the Edmonton Police Service to file a missing person report. They brought the email with them and explained their concerns. They told the officers about Johnny's character, his habits, his reliability. They explained that he would never disappear like this without warning. The police took the report, but their initial response was cautious. Adults have the right to travel. People sometimes do make impulsive decisions. The email, on its face, seemed to provide an explanation for Johnny's absence. The officers said they would look into it, but there was not much they could do immediately. Dale and Jeff left the police station frustrated but not defeated. They knew their friend. They knew something terrible had happened. If the police were not going to act immediately, then they would have to do what they could on their own. They started by retracing Johnny's steps. They knew he had been going on a date Friday night. They went back through Johnny's recent emails and found his correspondence with Jen. They saw the address where they were supposed to meet. On Tuesday, October 14th, Dale and Jeff drove to that address in South Edmonton. It was a residential street. The location was a double garage behind a house. There were no signs indicating it was a film studio. No company name. Nothing. It looked like an ordinary garage. They knocked on the door. No answer. They looked in the windows, but could not see much. The place looked empty. They wrote down the address and took photos. Then they went back to the police with this new information. They told the officers about the dating site, about Jen, about the address. They said they had driven there and something about it felt wrong. They urged the police to investigate the location. The police said they would follow up, but they were still treating this as a missing person case, not a crime. There was no evidence yet of foul play, just a concerning email and worried friends. But Dale and Jeff would not let it go. They kept pushing. They kept calling the police. They kept providing information. They printed out the emails between Johnny and Jen and highlighted the parts that seemed suspicious. They created a timeline of Johnny's last known movements. They contacted other friends and asked them to reach out to the police as well. What Johnny's friends did not know yet was that their instincts were absolutely correct, and they were not the only ones who had encountered the person behind the Jen profile. 1 week earlier, on Friday, October 3rd, a man named Gilles Tetrault had responded to a similar dating profile. He too had been lured to the same garage in South Edmonton. He too had walked into what he thought was a meeting with a woman he had been chatting with online. But when Gilles entered that garage, he was immediately attacked. A man wearing a hockey mask came at him with a stun gun. Gilles was hit with the electrical charge and went down. His attacker tried to subdue him, but Gilles was strong and he fought back with everything he had. He managed to break free and run out of the garage. He got to his truck and drove away, terrified and confused about what had just happened. Gilles did report the incident to police, but he was not taken entirely seriously at first. His story was so bizarre that officers were not sure what to make of it. A man in a hockey mask attacking him in a garage? It sounded almost unbelievable. Gilles himself was not sure what the attacker's intent had been. Was it a robbery? Some kind of prank? He could not make sense of it. Because Gilles escaped, his attacker did not achieve whatever goal he had in mind that night. And so the attacker tried again, 7 days later, with a new victim, with Johnny Altinger. This time, there was no escape. While Johnny's friends were pressuring the Edmonton police to investigate, the investigation was actually beginning to move forward, though they did not know it yet. Detectives were looking into the dating profile that had been used to lure Johnny. They were tracing IP addresses. They were following digital breadcrumbs. On October 18th, 8 days after Johnny disappeared, a local news station aired a story about Gilles Tetrault's attack. The story described how a man had been lured through an online dating site to a garage in South Edmonton, where he was attacked by someone in a hockey mask. Gilles had decided to go public with his experience, hoping it might help prevent something similar from happening to someone else. When Dale saw that news report, everything clicked into place. The same area of the city. The same type of lure. A garage. An attack. That is what happened to Johnny, Dale said to Jeff. That is exactly what happened. They immediately contacted the police and told them about the news story. They connected the dots between Gilles' attack and Johnny's disappearance. Now the police began to take the case much more seriously. This was no longer just a missing person with a strange email. This was potentially connected to a violent assault. Detectives reached out to Gilles Tetrault and got a full account of his experience. He described the garage, the attack, how he managed to escape. Most importantly, he had noticed some details about his attacker despite the hockey mask. He remembered the man's build, his approximate height. He remembered a car that had been parked in the garage. Now the police had a pattern. 2 men, both lured by fake dating profiles to the same location. One escaped. One did not come home. The digital forensics team traced the IP address used to create the fake profiles. It led them to a name. Mark Andrew Twitchell. Detectives learned that Mark Twitchell was a 29-year-old filmmaker, or at least he aspired to be one. He had recently rented the garage in South Edmonton to use as a set for a horror film he was making. He had spent weeks converting the space into a studio, complete with lighting equipment and props. On October 31st, Halloween night, police obtained a search warrant for the garage. When they entered, they found a scene that would haunt the investigators who saw it. The garage had been cleaned, but not well enough. When police used luminol, a chemical that reveals blood even after it has been cleaned up, the entire floor lit up like a constellation. There had been massive amounts of blood in that garage. Someone had tried desperately to clean it up, scrubbing and bleaching. But blood is difficult to eradicate completely. It seeps into cracks, it soaks into concrete, and luminol reveals it all. Police found more than just blood evidence. They found a makeshift autopsy table. They found weapons. They found plastic sheeting. They found cleaning supplies. They found a processing kit. The kind of thing you might use if you were trying to dismember and dispose of a body. And they found something else. Something that would prove crucial in the case against Mark Twitchell. They found a document on Twitchell's laptop. It was labeled SK Confessions. SK stood for serial killer. The document was 31 pages long, and it read like a detailed confession, though it was written in the third person as if it were fiction. It described, in chilling detail, the planning and execution of a murder. It described luring a victim through online dating. It described an attack in a garage. It described the disposal of a body. The document matched what had happened to Johnny Altinger almost perfectly. When investigators confronted Mark Twitchell, he initially claimed that SK Confessions was just a script for a movie. He said he was a filmmaker and he wrote dark material. It was fiction, he insisted. Creative writing, but the details were too specific. The timeline matched too closely, and as investigators dug deeper, they found more and more evidence connecting Twitchell to Johnny's murder. They found Johnny's blood in the garage. They found his DNA on equipment in the garage. They found evidence that Twitchell had used Johnny's laptop to send that fake email about Costa Rica. They found internet searches on Twitchell's computer about how to get rid of a body, how to cover up a murder, how to avoid detection. Mark Andrew Twitchell was arrested and charged with the first-degree murder of Johnny Altinger. To understand what drove Mark Twitchell to commit murder, we need to look briefly at who he was and what was happening in his life in the fall of 2008. Mark Twitchell wanted to be famous. More specifically, he wanted to be a famous filmmaker. He had grown up fascinated by movies, particularly by directors like George Lucas. He dreamed of creating the next great science fiction epic. He made short films and posted them online. He attended film school and tried to make connections in the industry, but success eluded him. His films did not gain traction. His big projects never got off the ground. By 2008, he was nearly 30 years old, deeply in debt, and no closer to his Hollywood dreams than he had been as a teenager. Twitchell became obsessed with a television series called Dexter. The show, which aired from 2006 to 2013, was about a forensic expert who moonlights as a vigilante serial killer. The character of Dexter Morgan kills people who he believes deserve to die, and he is meticulous about covering his tracks and disposing of bodies. Twitchell watched the show religiously. He identified with the character. He later told people that he saw himself as similar to Dexter. The SK Confessions document even referenced the show directly, describing the author as wanting to be like Dexter. But here is something important to understand. Millions of people watched Dexter. The show was incredibly popular. The vast majority of those viewers understood that it was fiction. They did not go out and start killing people. The show did not make Mark Twitchell a killer. What it did was provide a framework for fantasies that were already there. It gave shape to impulses that already existed in him. Mark Twitchell was responsible for his choices. The television show was not. This distinction matters because, in the aftermath of the case, there was some debate about whether violent media could inspire real violence. The answer, according to psychologists and criminal experts, is that media can influence the form that existing violent tendencies take, but it does not create those tendencies in people who do not already have them. Twitchell had rented the garage under the pretense of making a horror film. He told the landlord he needed a space to shoot some scenes. He spent weeks setting it up, buying equipment, preparing the space. Some of that preparation was legitimate film work, but some of it was preparation for something else entirely. In early October, he created the fake online dating profiles. He used photos he had stolen from other people's social media accounts. He created a persona designed to be attractive to men looking for relationships. He called himself Jen, and sometimes Sheena. He started conversations with multiple men on the dating site. His plan was to lure someone to the garage, kill them, and dispose of the body. Why? The SK Confessions document suggests he wanted to know what it felt like. He wanted to see if he could do it. He wanted to feel powerful. He wanted to be like his fictional hero. On October 3rd, he tried with Gilles Tétrault. It did not work. Gilles fought back and escaped. Twitchell could have stopped there. He could have realized how close he had come to being caught and abandoned his plan. But he did not. Instead, he tried again. 7 days later, he lured Johnny Altinger to the same garage. This time, he succeeded. After killing Johnny, Twitchell spent hours trying to clean up the evidence. He dismembered the body. This is a horrific detail, but it is important to the case because it shows the level of planning and the coldness of his actions. He used the processing kit he had prepared. He put the remains in garbage bags. Then he disposed of the body parts. He later told investigators he had dumped them in a sewer, but the exact location was never specified, and Johnny's remains were never found. This would become one of the most painful aspects of the case for Johnny's family and friends. They would never be able to lay him to rest. They would never have that closure. After disposing of the body, Twitchell used Johnny's own laptop to send emails from Johnny's account. He wrote to Johnny's friends and family, saying he had gone to Costa Rica. He tried to buy himself time. He tried to create a believable cover story, but he underestimated Johnny's friends. He did not know how well they knew him. He did not realize that his fake emails would immediately raise suspicions. The trial of Mark Twitchell began in March 2011, more than 2 years after Johnny's murder. It was a high-profile case, drawing national attention across Canada. The prosecution faced a significant challenge. They did not have Johnny's body. In murder trials, the body is usually crucial evidence. It can establish cause of death, time of death, and other important facts. Without it, the prosecution had to build their case entirely on circumstantial evidence. But they had a lot of circumstantial evidence. They had the blood in the garage, which DNA testing confirmed was Johnny's. They had the SK confessions document, which described the murder in damning detail. They had Twitchell's internet searches about body disposal. They had the fake dating profiles traced back to Twitchell. They had Gilles Tétreault's testimony about his attack, which established a pattern. They had the fake emails sent from Johnny's computer, which forensics showed had been accessed from Twitchell's residence. The defense argued that SK Confessions was fiction, that Twitchell was a filmmaker with a dark imagination, but not an actual killer. They tried to create doubt about the DNA evidence. They argued that without a body, the prosecution could not prove beyond reasonable doubt that Johnny was dead, let alone that Twitchell had killed him. The prosecution countered with a powerful question. If Johnny Altinger was alive, where was he? Why had he not contacted his family in over 2 years? Why had his bank accounts gone untouched? Why had he abandoned his job, his home, his entire life? Gilles Tétreault took the stand and described his attack in the same garage, by someone using the same methods. His testimony was powerful because it showed this was not an accident or a fight that went too far. It was a planned attack using a deliberate lure. The SK Confessions document was read aloud in court. It described luring the target through online dating. It described the attack. It described the feeling of power. It described the cleanup and disposal. The parallels to Johnny's case were impossible to ignore. Johnny's friends testified about the fake emails, about how they immediately knew something was wrong. Dale described Johnny's character, his reliability, his habits. He explained why the Costa Rica story never made sense. He told the court about their efforts to get police to investigate, about finding the connection to Gilles' attack, about refusing to give up. Johnny's family attended the trial every day. His mother sat in the courtroom, listening to the details of her son's murder, knowing she would never be able to bury him. The pain on her face was evident to everyone in the courtroom. On April 11th, 2011, after deliberating for just 5 hours, the jury returned with their verdict: guilty of first-degree murder. Mark Twitchell showed no emotion as the verdict was read. He was sentenced to life in prison with no possibility of parole for 25 years. Under Canadian law, this is the harshest sentence available. But even with the conviction, Johnny's family faced an unbearable situation. They knew what had happened to their son. They knew who killed him, but they did not know where he was. Mark Twitchell refused to reveal the location of Johnny's remains. He claimed he had dumped them in a sewer system, but he would not say where. Police searched based on his vague descriptions, but they found nothing. To this day, Johnny Altinger's body has never been recovered. For his loved ones, this absence made the grief even more unbearable. There was no funeral, no burial, no place to go to feel close to him. Just an empty space where he should be. The impact of Johnny Altinger's murder extended far beyond the courtroom. For his family, the loss was devastating. His mother, Elfriede Altinger, became an advocate for victims' rights. She spoke publicly about the need for justice system reforms, particularly regarding the rights of families to know where their loved ones are buried. She argued that convicted killers should be required to reveal the location of victims' remains, and that failure to do so should result in additional penalties. For Johnny's friends, the grief was mixed with a profound sense of responsibility. They had fought to find the truth. They had refused to accept the easy explanation. Their persistence had led to Mark Twitchell's arrest and conviction, but it did not bring Johnny back. It did not erase the horror of what had happened to him. Dale and Jeff and the others in Johnny's circle found themselves processing complicated emotions. Pride that they had honored their friend by not giving up. Grief that they could not save him. Anger at the system that had not initially taken their concerns seriously. Relief that justice had been served. Sadness that would never fully go away. The Edmonton community was shaken by the case. The idea that someone could be lured to their death through a dating website struck fear into many people. Online dating was still relatively new in 2008, and many people were already wary of it. This case seemed to confirm their worst fears. In the years since, dating platforms have implemented more safety features, warning messages, tips for safe first meetings, verification systems. But the fundamental vulnerability remains. When you agree to meet someone you have only talked to online, you are taking a leap of faith. You are trusting that they are who they say they are. Johnny was not naive. He was not careless. He did what millions of people do every day. He tried to meet someone. He responded to what seemed like a genuine connection. The fault for what happened lies entirely with the person who exploited that normal human desire for connection. The fault lies with Mark Twitchell. There were some broader conversations sparked by the case as well. The Dexter connection led to debates about media violence and its effects. Does watching a show about a serial killer make someone more likely to become one? The consensus among experts is no. The show might provide a template for someone who already has violent fantasies, but it does not create those fantasies in a healthy mind. Mark Twitchell was not a victim of television. He was a narcissist who wanted to feel powerful and important. He wanted to do something that would make him memorable. He wanted to be special. He thought committing murder would accomplish that. In a twisted way, it did make him memorable, but not as he imagined. He is not remembered as a brilliant filmmaker or a fascinating criminal mastermind. He is remembered as a wannabe, a failure who destroyed an innocent life and caused immeasurable pain because he could not handle his own insignificance. Mark Twitchell is currently serving his sentence at Saskatchewan Penitentiary in Canada. Under Canadian law, he will be eligible to apply for parole in 2033 after serving 25 years. Whether he will ever be released is uncertain. Given the nature of his crime and his refusal to reveal where Johnny's body is located, it is unlikely he will be granted parole at his first hearing, or perhaps ever. In prison, Twitchell has maintained his interest in writing. He has written to journalists and authors, trying to tell his version of events. He has sought attention, even from behind bars. Some of his correspondences have been published, giving insight into his mindset. They reveal a man who still seems to view himself as the protagonist of an interesting story, rather than as someone who committed a terrible crime. This narcissism, this inability or unwillingness to truly reckon with what he has done, makes his incarceration all the more necessary. He has shown no genuine remorse. He has not helped Johnny's family find peace by revealing where their son is. He remains, fundamentally, concerned primarily with himself. Johnny's friends have tried to move forward with their lives, but they carry his memory with them. They speak about him when asked. They remember the good times. They remember his laugh, his reliability, his kindness. They remember that he was more than just a victim in a sensational crime. He was their friend. On what would have been Johnny's birthdays, they gather and share stories. They keep his memory alive in the way friends do, by remembering who he really was. Not a statistic, not a plot point in a true crime story, but a real person who mattered. Several years after the trial, one of Johnny's friends gave an interview to a local newspaper. He was asked what he wanted people to know about Johnny. He thought for a moment, then said this: "Johnny was the kind of person who showed up. If you needed him, he was there. And when he needed us, we tried to do the same. We could not save him, but we could make sure the truth came out. We could make sure he got justice. That is what friends do." That statement captures something essential about this case. It is not just a story about a murder. It is a story about friendship. About people who knew each other well enough to recognize when something was wrong. About people who cared enough to keep pushing when it would have been easier to accept a convenient explanation. About people who loved their friend enough to fight for him even after he was gone. If there are lessons to take from Johnny Altinger's story, they are these. First, trust your instincts. If something feels wrong, it probably is. Johnny's friends knew immediately that the Costa Rica email was fake because they knew him. They knew his patterns, his way of speaking, his character. When something did not match, they noticed. In our digital age, it is easy to fool people who do not know us well. It is much harder to fool people who really know us. Pay attention to the people in your life. Learn their patterns. Be present enough to notice when something is off. Second, if you are going to meet someone you have only known online, take precautions. Meet in a public place. Tell a friend where you're going and when you expect to be back. Arrange a check-in time. Trust your gut during the meeting. If anything feels wrong, leave. Your safety is more important than being polite. Third, do not give up on someone you love. When Johnny's friends first went to the police, they were not taken as seriously as they should have been. It would have been easy to back off at that point, to accept that maybe the authorities knew better. But they did not back off. They kept pushing. They kept providing information. They connected the dots between Johnny's disappearance and Gila's attack. Their persistence made the difference. If they had given up, Mark Twitchell might never have been caught. Fourth, remember that behind every true crime case is a real person. Johnny was not a character in a story. He was a son, a friend, a colleague. He had hopes and dreams. He had favorite foods and inside jokes with his friends. He had a future that should have happened. When we consume true crime content, whether in documentaries or podcasts or videos like this one, we need to remember the humanity of the victims. They deserve more than to be entertainment. They deserve to be remembered as people. Finally, understand that ordinary people can make a difference. Johnny's friends were not detectives or forensic experts. They were regular people with regular jobs, but they had knowledge that the professionals did not have. They knew Johnny. They knew when something did not fit. They used that knowledge to push for justice. You do not need a badge or special training to make a difference when someone you love is in trouble. You just need to care enough to act. Johnny Altinger was 38 years old when his life was stolen from him. He should have had decades ahead of him. He should have found love, maybe started a family. He should have continued working, continued seeing his friends, continued living the life he had built. All of that was taken in one night by someone who saw him not as a person, but as a means to an end. But Johnny's story did not end in that garage. It lived on in the hearts of the people who loved him, in their refusal to accept easy answers, in their determination to find the truth, in their fight for justice. That is his legacy. Not the horror of his death, but the love of his friends, and the reminder that even in the darkest circumstances, human goodness and determination can prevail. If we remember nothing else from this case, we should remember that. We should remember that Johnny Altinger mattered, that his friends showed us what it means to truly care about someone, that even when the worst happens, we do not have to accept it quietly. We can fight, we can push, we can demand the truth, and sometimes if we refuse to give up, we can make sure that justice is done. Johnny Altinger's friends did that for him. They fought when he could not fight for himself. They spoke when he could not speak. They made sure the world knew what happened, and that the person responsible was held accountable. That is what friends do. That is what love looks like in the darkest times. That is what it means to not give up on someone. In a world that can sometimes feel cold and indifferent, Johnny's friends remind us that connection matters, that knowing someone deeply matters, that caring enough to act matters. They could not bring their friend back, but they could make sure he was not forgotten. They could make sure his death was not in vain. If you are listening to this and you have people in your life who matter to you, take a moment to reach out to them. Let them know you care. Pay attention to them. Be present. Learn their patterns. Because the sad truth is that bad things can happen to good people. But the hopeful truth is that when bad things happen, love and determination can still make a difference. Johnny Altinger's story is a tragedy. There is no way around that. But within that tragedy is a reminder of what matters most. Not fame or recognition or success, but connection, loyalty, friendship, love. The willingness to show up for someone even when they are gone. Johnny's friends showed up for him. They fought for him. They got justice for him. And in doing so, they honored not just his memory, but the very best parts of what it means to be human. That is how we should remember this case. Not just as a cautionary tale about online dating or the dangers of narcissism or the influence of media violence, but as a story about ordinary people who did something extraordinary, who loved their friend enough to refuse to let his disappearance be explained away, who trusted themselves enough to keep pushing when others told them to stop. Johnny Altinger was loved. He is still loved. He is remembered not as a victim, but as a friend, a son, a person who mattered. His friends made sure of that. They made sure that his story would be told not just as a crime, but as a life that had meaning and value, and that ultimately is the most important thing any of us can hope for. To be known, to be loved, to be remembered, to have people in our lives who will fight for us even when we cannot fight for ourselves. Johnny had that, and because he had that, justice was done.